CGTN, China Global Television Network.
UN chief calls for urgent release of Sudan Prime Minister and other leaders as military dissolves government. And President Xi Jinping hails restoration of China's legal seat as victory of all people. This is Africa Live. Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Peninah Karibe. The military takeover in Sudan is still a top focus around the world. Here's what we know at this hour. The country's military has dissolved the transitional government hours after troops arrested the Prime Minister and several other senior government officials. The military has also declared a state of emergency. The UN chief has denounced the takeover and urgently called for the release of the country's interim Prime Minister and other top cabinet officials. Protesters took to the streets of Khartoum and Omdurman city, and there were reports of gunfire. Sudan's military leader, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, announced on national television that quarrels among political factions prompted the military to intervene. He said the military will appoint a technocratic government to lead the country to elections set for July 2023, but he made clear the military will remain in charge. And coming up in Africa Live Business tonight, we're looking at how Sudan has blocked vessels carrying fuel from entering its territorial waters. Uche Okoronko will bring us the details on that. But first, let's dive into the details for now. Sudan's military ruler has declared a national state of emergency and dissolved the government. General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan has also announced the formation of a new government, even as the European Union raises concerns. CGTN's Joy Karukijuma reports.
Sudan's capital city, Khartoum, has been rocked by protests. This is after soldiers detained civilian leaders in charge of leading the transition to democracy on Monday. Activists have denounced the arrest as a coup. Meanwhile, Sudan's military leader has dissolved government.
And number 4, the dissolution of the Transitional Sovereign Council and the dismissal of its members. Number 5, the dissolution of the cabinet. Number 6, conclusion of the tenures of the provincial governors.
General Burhan made the sweeping changes, saying quarrels among political factions prompted the military to intervene. The general says a new technocrat government would lead Sudan to elections proposed for July 2023.
And we are taking the steps that are preserving the path of the magnificent December Revolution until its final goals are achieved in arriving at a complete civilian state through free and transparent elections.
Internet services were cut across the country and main roads and bridges into Khartoum shut. The European Commission has expressed concern over the recent happenings in Sudan.
The EU is very concerned about Sudan's military forces reportedly putting Prime Minister Hamdok under house arrest, and as well as detaining other members of the civilian leadership, and we urge for their fast release. We have seen also the reports of cuts of telephone and internet in Sudan. We urgently call for unrestricted means of communication to reach those in need. Violence and bloodshed must be avoided at all costs.
The Chinese Foreign Ministry said China is also keenly monitoring the developments in Sudan and called on all parties to resolve their differences through dialogue. The North African country has been divided over its leadership. In the last 2 weeks, thousands supporting the transitional government have been marching in cities to back the full transfer to civilian rule. This as rivals staged sit-in demonstrations calling for return to military rule. Joy Kirukijuma, CGTN.
The latest developments in Sudan follow an attempted coup last month. So how did the country get here? Chamgono takes us through.
In 2019, Sudan's former president Omar al-Bashir was ousted by the military after months of protest. A power-sharing deal between military and civilian groups was agreed after his removal. It was meant to pave the way for elections at the end of 2023. But tensions between civilian and military transitional leaders have soared. Just last month, a coup attempt took place in Sudan. Some say it was an organized attempt by the military to take power. In just a week from today, a civilian leader was expected to take over as head of the transitional authority. Some critics say this could be the reason behind the arrest of Transitional Prime Minister Hamdok and 4 other cabinet ministers, a tactic to scuttle the civilian democratic transition. Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok has called on people to take to the streets to protest against the prospect of military rule. Hamdok's arrest comes days after he and Sovereign Council leader General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan met with Jeffrey Feltman, the U.S. Special Envoy for the Horn of Africa. Feltman urged all sides to recommit to working together to implement country's return to democracy after Bashir's removal. General Burhan said the military was keen to protect that transition. With the latest developments, the promise of Sudan's transition is in the balance. Chamwono, CGTN.
Let's now hear from Will Carter, the country director of the Norwegian Refugee Council in Sudan, who is on the ground in Khartoum. He reports that the situation remains uncertain as tens of thousands of people were already protesting in the capital before the coup unfolded. Let's listen in.
Tens of thousands of people already protesting in the streets. It's a very tense environment in Khartoum. Burning tires and trees that have been felled to block roads. We see military motorcades moving up north through the city. So it's tense, and with a major communications blackout today, it wasn't clear what was happening. We're really concerned, of course, for the political future of the country, but also, this was a country where there were 14 million people depending on humanitarian assistance, 1 million refugees. It's so important that we can also continue to help keep people alive, not just in Khartoum, but in refugee camps and displacement camps elsewhere around the country.
Let's now bring in our correspondent Patrick Oyet, joining us live from Juba in neighboring South Sudan. We also have with us Raga Makawi, a political commentator and editor at African Arguments, joining us live via Zoom from London. Patrick, the day has been marked by internet shutdown in Sudan, protests, suspension of international flights and closure of Khartoum airport. How are things there now?
Yeah, Peninah, before coming on air, we had a report from Khartoum that still people were on the streets, people were still demonstrating, and many of them are actually saying since 2019, they managed to actually overthrow former President Omar al-Bashir through demonstration. They believe that even now they are able to demonstrate until whatever chaos is in Sudan will actually be resolved. So people are still on the streets, they are still demonstrating. Perhaps some of them will sleep on the street and pick up from there the next day. And of course, we've also had reaction now from from South Sudan here in Juba. South Sudan's foreign ministry has released a statement, in which statement they say they support the people of the Sudan. They believe that the Sudanese people will really resolve the problem peacefully, and a lot of reaction has been coming in. Because people here in South Sudan are also concerned because they have relatives in Sudan, they have colleagues in Sudan, so they are also concerned, and they are hoping that the problem in the Sudan will be resolved peacefully. We've also heard, of course, from the African Union already a reaction. We have heard from the East African Regional Body, Intergovernmental Authority on Development, calling on the peace partners to go back to the table to discuss and resolve this problem amicably. So yeah, basically, people are still protesting in the streets of Khartoum, Peninah.
All right, thank you, Patrick. Now, Raga, let's come to you. The military says a competent government has been put in place. What does this say about the fate of the civilian members of the now dissolved transitional government?
Well, I mean, a competent government has to be decided upon democratically, which in the transitional period is defined by a consensus between all parties sworn in as per the constitutional document. Anything else is illegitimate and unlawful. Now, at the beginning, as per the constitutional document, the military always had an honorary role and no executive powers whatsoever. what we've seen in the past 2.5 years is a failure to implement the constitutional provisions, specifically structural reform of the military and security apparatus, because it's been blocked by the military itself. Now, this has already bore catastrophic consequences on the transitional process, whether in terms of the day-to-day running of the political affair, stifling any attempts by civilians to institute reform. Naturally, this also has implications on issues that have to do with the rule of law. So what happens to members of civilian government who've been forcibly led away from their homes in the middle of the night and detained without due process? I mean, the entire process is kind of connected. So it's the failure in the beginning to adhere to the constitutional process, which reserved an honorary role to the military, which today has borne consequences, which we see in terms of this unjust and lack of due process in dealing with members of the dissolved government.
Since the transitional government was formed in 2019, the international community has been falling in line to help Sudan on the transition journey. Do you think the support and the goodwill will continue in the face of what has happened?
Well, the Americans and the Troika had made it clear from the beginning that any financial and political support to Sudan's transition is predicated upon adhering to the constitutional process and seeing through the transitional period. While far from perfect, there was constant criticism around the performance and policy choices of the transitional civilian government. Still, it remained the bedrock from which to build an accountable process of governance and citizenship for the vast majority. Now, the international community is well aware of that and continues to provide assistance where possible. However, on the other side, there's a regional axis and regional dynamics of power present, and they provide a different reality. So, for example, Egypt and Emirates, they support a military takeover, a military and militia takeover, in order to exert influence through them. At the same time, America's interests in the region are tied to Egyptian and Emirati roles, basically. So it's kind of a balance between wanting to support Sudan to see through the transitional period until the end, and the interference and influence of the regional praxis, whose idea of, and plans for Sudan are very different from that of the international community. So it remains to be seen how the balance works, the equilibrium, how it kind of works out towards the end. I mean, to which side.
All right, Raga Makawi, live for us in London. Patrick Oyet, live in Juba. Thank you both for joining us. In Uganda, there are reports of yet another explosion, this time on a passenger bus. The Ugandan police force says a team of bomb experts has been dispatched to Lungala village in central Uganda. The incident happened along the Kampala-Masaka highway. The bus was ferrying passengers from Kampala to Bushenyi district in the west. Police have confirmed that 2 people have died and several others are injured. This comes just less than 72 hours after an attack on a bar and eatery in Kampala, where members of the Ugandan government were gathering. We have Leon Sinyange live for us in Kampala. Leon, there have been claims of another blast today. What have you been able to confirm?
Well, certainly, like you've said, the police have confirmed that 2 people died in that incident on the bus that was traveling to the western part of Uganda. The bus had only traveled approximately 40 kilometers, and that incident happened in a place called Lugala. Several people who were injured on that bus have been evacuated, and like you hinted earlier, that the police has dispatched bomb experts to to find out a little bit more about how exactly this happened. And sadly, though, it has happened just approximately 48 hours after a bomb explosion happened in the suburbs of Kampala on Saturday night. One person died and seven others were injured and later hospitalized from that particular incident. The authorities here say that this could potentially be works of domestic terror groups. They, however, haven't specifically pointed out at which particular terror group, though the investigations will be going on a little bit more, and then, of course, the authorities will be letting us know who specifically could be the perpetrators. President Yoweri Museveni tweeted on the weekend over the Saturday night incident. Possibly we'll be looking forward to hearing from the president himself over this particular incident yet again, which of course puts much of security right now in the sport.
All right, Leon, thank you for that update. Leon Xinjiang live in Kampala. Meanwhile, police in Uganda say they are investigating claims made by ISIL that the militant group was responsible for a bomb attack in the country's capital, Kampala. One person was killed in that explosion at an eatery in one of the city's suburbs. Leon Xinjiang once more with the details.
The militant group ISIL posted a statement about the attack via an affiliated Telegram channel on Sunday. According to local police, Saturday night's explosion at an eatery on the outskirts of Uganda's capital killed a 20-year-old waitress and injured 7 others. Police say 3 men disguised as customers planted a bag holding the explosives under the table. Authorities earlier blamed the blast on domestic terror groups. However, none has specifically been confirmed to be behind the attack.
All our efforts are towards unraveling what happened exactly and who is responsible. We can only be able to give you that after our investigations are complete.
Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni in a tweet said that the blast was a terrorist act and has vowed to catch the perpetrators. The incident occurred a week after the United Kingdom had warned that terrorists could carry out an attack in Uganda. Leon Xinjiang, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Ethiopia conducted 2 more airstrikes in Tigray on Sunday as the government intensifies a nearly week-old campaign of aerial bombardment against rebel forces who control most of the region. The government said all targets were successfully destroyed through a careful operation. TPLF rebels say civilians were targeted. Here's CGTN's Gurum Chala with more.
It's now almost a week since the Ethiopian National Defense Force started what is dubbed as the final offensive against Tigray force. Repeated airstrikes were made against strategic locations in the region, which are said to be used by the rebel force. The latest bombing came on Sunday in Adowa town against a garment and textile factory which TPLF was allegedly used to manufacture military equipment. This facility is said to have been producing duplicated ENDF outfits for the TPLF. Sources in Tigray claim the airstrikes have targeted civilian establishments and have killed and injured several people. Addis Ababa has downplayed the accusations and said the aerial bombardments are being done based on months of reconnaissance and a careful mission plan to avoid civilian casualties. On the other hand, the UN has already suspended its humanitarian flights to Mekelle, the capital of Tigray. That is following the growing serious insecurity there. Gurum Chala, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Following the escalation of civil unrest in the kingdom of Eswatini and reports of 2 more deaths, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, as chair of the SADC organ on politics, defense and security cooperation, sent a special envoy and SADC delegation from Namibia and Botswana to Eswatini late last week. Angela Kupla has more from Johannesburg.
According to Ramaphosa, the special envoy Jeff Karibe, an ex-South African minister, met King Mzwati III. Radebe also met the country's Prime Minister, members of the Cabinet, MPs, members of the diplomatic corps, civil society organizations and trade unions. It's understood that following those discussions and meetings, the King announced that a national dialogue would be held in November. This was seen as a starting point to addressing the current challenges facing the country. The country has been racked and rocked by anti-monarchy demonstrations that broke out in June and prompted authorities to deploy the army. The latest flare-up was spearheaded by students, civil servants and transport workers. Ramaphosa said that all the parties agreed that for those talks to stand a reasonable chance of success, a peaceful and conducive environment was needed. However, opposition parties and pro-democracy groups said in a statement over the weekend that they wouldn't be attending that meeting. Since unrest began in the country in June, the death toll is estimated at between 37 and 80 people. It's still tense in Eswatini following the ban of all protests and marches that was announced on Thursday last week. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Restoration of China's seat in the United Nations was an epic diplomatic battle. A journey fraught with obstacles.
Yes!
Africa's support was crucial. Victory saw a new era in China-Africa ties, founded on a common future and shared prosperity.
His ceremony was held this morning in Beijing to mark the 50 years since the United Nations restored China's lawful seat. President Xi Jinping made a speech on the country's role in international diplomacy. He hailed the event in 1971 as a victory of all people. Xi said the past 50 years saw China's contributions to world peace and welfare fall as the country has become the world's second largest economy. He said the Chinese people have been cooperating with people of the world to safeguard international justice. From the Belt and Road Initiative to the fight against COVID, China has been making efforts to spur world development. Xi also stressed the Chinese people are strong supporters of the United Nations and multilateralism. More than 50,000 Chinese peacekeepers have been dispatched to UN missions. Xi also called on the world to oppose unilateralism and protectionism. Instead, he said the world should be built into a community with a shared future for mankind.
China is a founding member of the United Nations with a permanent seat on the UN Security Council. In this episode of Panorama Africa, we take a look back at China's history with the organization and the Security Council and what that means for Africa today.
An estimated 75 million people died in World War II. It remains the most devastating global conflict to date. With the promise to save future generations from the scourge of war, the victors of the battle, China, the United States, Great Britain, France and the former Soviet Union, invited world leaders to sign a peace treaty in the form of the UN Charter. The United Nations, as we know it, was officially born. The Charter established the principal organs of the UN, including the Security Council, whose primary responsibility is the maintenance of international peace and security. The body has 10 rotating members and 5 permanent members, the same allied countries who won the war. As international relations expert Victor Gao explains, this is an act of paying homage to history.
This structure is the result of the victory against Nazi Germany and imperialistic Japan and Italy in the Second World War. So this is based on bloodshed and sacrifices of these 5 allied countries in the Second World War. This historical heritage needs to be fully respected.
China's relationship with the UN took a turn in 1949 due to internal political events that shaped the current Chinese nation. The Communist Party of China won the Chinese Civil War and established the People's Republic of China, declaring itself the sole legitimate government of China. The Kuomintang, or Chinese National Party, retreated to the island of Taiwan. Even so, the UN retained its representatives in the UN and Security Council.
The matter finally came down to a vote, and with the help of 26 African UN member states, the People's Republic of China finally resumed its place in the UN on the 25th of October 1971.
Yes. Cameroon? Yes. United Kingdom? Yes. Yes. Yes.
With the support of very important support from African countries and other countries in the world, China, that is the People's Republic of China, resumed its membership in the United Nations in 1971, not only in the General Assembly of the United Nations, but also, very importantly, in the Security Council of the United Nations.
I was director of the legal...
Former Tanzanian Prime Minister Joseph Sinde Warioba was present during this historic occasion.
I was in New York, and after the vote, there was jubilation. No, but it was an important occasion. For us, it was very important because our relationship with China was very good. China is one of the countries which helped us.
Africa has had a mixed relationship with the UN Security Council. Of the 30 sanctions regimes applied by the group to maintain or restore peace and security, 19 have been imposed on African countries, ranging from economic sanctions to arms embargoes, travel bans and commodity restrictions. Without a permanent seat at the UN Security Council, Africa has had to manage its affairs through non-permanent seats. The likes of Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria and South Africa have represented the continent at least twice each on the Council since 1966. But with Africa occupying so much of the Security Council's agenda, some argue that the continent deserves a permanent seat at the table.
Please raise their hand.
However, experts both in China and Africa agree that African nations do have a unique ally at the table in the form of China, the only developing country on the Security Council and the only country not to have pursued a colonial, imperialist or Cold War agenda with Africa.
If you talk about countries like Great Britain or France, they were imperialistic countries in Africa, each having more than dozens of colonies in Africa, leaving behind them a history of tragedy and exploitation, etc. For the United States, they had several hundred years of bad, notorious history of enslaving African people, turning the Africans into slaves. This is truly a major tragedy for mankind and a crime against humanity. Whereas for China, as far as China is concerned, there has never been any institutional discrimination against Africans or against people of color. And this is very important. And this makes China a very unique country among the 5 permanent member states of the Security Council of the United Nations. And this also has made sure that China can rise up on the occasion and defend the fundamental interests of the African countries as a whole and promoting peace and stability in Africa without any hesitation and without any liability and without any skeleton in its closet.
In Africa, we were preoccupied with winning our freedom. The independence movement, which started in the 50s, intensified in the 60s and 70s, that was the preoccupation of Africa. And during that time, China was one of the countries which really assisted the freedom movements in Africa, whether by training or providing the material in order to gain independence. China played a vital role in that one.
Today, China continues to play an important role in Africa. China is the second biggest contributor of funds to the UN's peacekeeping operations and provides more peacekeeping personnel than any other permanent member of the Security Council.
In May this year, at a UN Security Council open debate on peace and security in Africa, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi called for continued support for African countries in seeking African solutions for African problems. Furthermore, he called on the Security Council to actively provide peacekeeping funds for Africa, support the AU's peace operations, and help Africa enhance its capacity for peacekeeping, stability maintenance, and counterterrorism. Beyond security, China and Africa have proven to be strong partners, cooperating in many different fields, from trade and infrastructure to education, health, and culture.
Now, the emphasis was on economic cooperation and other important issues of international concern. And China has done that, is still cooperating with the African countries, with the developing countries, in order to develop. And as I said, we cooperate without any threats, without any pressure.
The litmus test as far as China is concerned as a permanent member state of the United Nations is that on the one hand, we want to avoid any interference in domestic or internal affairs of any sovereign country in Africa. On the other hand, we want to make sure that sufferings and turmoil and instability, wars, etc., can be contained and losses of life can be minimized, if not brought down to zero.
African soldiers did contribute to the war efforts that inspired the emergence of the United Nations. But countries around the continent often feel marginalized when it comes to decision-making on global matters. But the efforts of friendly and powerful nations on the Security Council, like China, have helped the continent make landmark achievements. The African Union and other regional bodies are now at the forefront of seeking local solutions to local challenges, better placing the continent in a position to apply the rule of law and chart its collective economic and social agenda. After all, it is our world. Lindy Mtongana, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Various other African leaders and scholars have commended China for playing what many are calling a groundbreaking role at the United Nations over the past 50 years. China has been praised for using its seat at the Security Council to promote peace, stability and development, especially among developing nations. Experts are also applauding China for pushing for multilateralism that has seen the development of the global economy and furthered South-to-South cooperation.
China is one of the most influential countries politically, economically in the world today. So China cannot be ignored and will never be ignored because she has established herself as an active player on the world stage. Apart from that, as African countries, we are also grateful for the support that we have been receiving from China.
The importance of China being part of the UN is the China's love for peace. China disregards doesn't like investing in fanning conflict in Africa, in fanning, siding with countries that are fighting. China always comes from the back. Guys, is there anything that we can do to resolve without fighting? And therefore, their presence in the UN and with the right to veto has brought a lot of sanity, in the UN than allowing a particular country or particular countries to take the monopoly of decisions.
And I think Mao Zedong said it very eloquently and succinctly. It was on the shoulders of the Africans that they came through into the UN. Since then, I think in the last 50 years, the Chinese have been very consistent. I think that's one of the biggest contributions that they've made in terms of their consistency in maintaining how the UN should be operating in terms of its mandate. I think the Chinese have understood how critical peace and security interventions are, particularly if they are going to be this growing actor on the international stage. And they just didn't become a passive actor in peace and security. They took on the role of mediation and brokering peace agreements and so forth.
Firstly, most of the African countries were colonized countries.
China has supported the process of decolonization of these countries. Then at the Great Bandung Conference, China was an ally for all the underdeveloped countries. This is why currently people are saying there must be a representation of Africa in the Security Council. At that time, we said there must be a representative of the developing countries in the United Nations Security Council. And this hailing of solidarity from all developing countries and African countries in particular are among the elements that have favored China.
All right, let's now catch up with the day's business news. Uche joins us with the latest.
Thank you, Peninah. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Sudan blocks vessels carrying fuel from entering its territorial waters. And Tanzania and Burundi outline plans to improve economic ties.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Well, let's start off in Sudan. The country has decided to halt the entry of vessels carrying fuel into its territorial waters in order to avoid incurring fines due to delays in offloading. Now, protesters from the Beja tribes in eastern Sudan have been shutting ports and blocking roads in protest of what they describe as poor political and economic conditions in the region. The Minister of Oil and Gas, Jayden Ali Obaid, says that the country's strategic reserves are now running low. Meanwhile, Tanzania and Burundi have signed an agreement to strengthen bilateral cooperation and to promote sustainable economic growth. The move comes after a 3-day visit of Burundi's President Evariste Ndayishimiye to Tanzania. Now, trade volumes between the two nations have increased from over $26 million in 2015 to more than $86 million in 2019. The Tanzania Investment Center has registered about 18 Burundian-funded projects which have employed more than 3,500 Tanzanians. Now, the head of both states say that efforts are underway to increase more business growth.
Tulianza biashara vizuri, biashara ikapanda mpaka kufikia thamani ya bilioni.
We started well the business. The trading went up to $86 million in 2019. But due to the global pandemic, the business collapsed again. So we've decided to cooperate and review the existing challenges apart from the pandemic so that the business can grow up again. We have seen that we have many useful opportunities to boost the business in our countries.
Kuzitumia ili biashara iweze kukua baina nchi zetu.
Serikali ya Burundi inashukuru sana serikali ya Tanzania.
The government of Burundi is grateful to the Tanzanian government for offering 2 special sites for the construction of dry ports, which will reduce shipping costs and penalties to the cargoes, which would otherwise exceed the time limit at the Dar es Salaam port.
Meanwhile, in South Africa, the 4-year-old stock exchange, A2X, backed by billionaire Patrice Motsepe's African Rainbow Capital Investments, says that it expects to break even by 2023. Now, that's as its trading, or rather trading in the secondary listings it offers, takes off now. Here's Angelo Coppola with more.
The exchange has 12 top 40 stocks listed and 57 listings, including brands like Process and Investec PLC, the latest to get a secondary listing. The focus has shifted to the brokers.
About 2 years ago, we made a decision to launch our own post-trade system, and this actually came into play earlier this year, and that has created a big unlock in terms of activity on A2X. So we've seen a couple of our brokers that have been working with us suddenly they're totally automated. They can trade across markets. They can get the best price for their clients, and they just, as I said, they come in, they trade away, and we've seen the result of that. I think August was a record month for us, and September, just to give you a sense, was 5 times that.
However, not everyone is convinced that the exchange is needed.
I'm still trying to work out what benefit they do bring to the wholesale space, to the people whom they are servicing. Is it a cost factor? I'm not sure, because I don't see all that much trade taking place on the JSE. I think our volumes are actually coming down, and today trading in the wholesale space is very, very, very cheap.
The exchange has big plans for the next 2 years.
We're looking at bringing new order types to South Africa, order types that happen in Europe and are familiar in Europe, but we don't have in South Africa, so we're looking to roll out a few of those. In addition, we obviously amended our license to include inward listings some time ago, so we are focusing on bringing a new product to South Africa.
There are still some questions about why locally listed companies would want a secondary local listing.
What makes these companies want a secondary listing? I can understand a secondary listing in London, secondary listing Australia, or Europe or America. Those have paid handsomely for a lot of other businesses, but I'm not too sure whether it's aligned to the derivative markets and alternative markets. There may be a point there.
Brady says they have a compelling value proposition.
Our fees, exchange fees, are literally half those of the standard rates. And that in itself attracts additional players who are very cost sensitive. So that's the one thing. The second thing is, as you start reducing friction costs, you attract this new liquidity and your bid-offer spreads start to narrow. So when you come to buy or sell a share, you can actually generally buy it in A2X at a better price.
This exchange appears to have hit critical mass, and it's likely to go from strength to strength going forward. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Sandton, South Africa.
And in some international news, China's Xinjiang is enjoying a bumper cotton harvest this season. The northwestern region expects an output of 5.2 million tons this year. Meanwhile, textile companies in Xinjiang are rushing to fill those orders, but with rising prices and U.S. sanctions, the industry is caught between a rock and a hard place. Well, our reporter Feng Yilei shows how live streaming is now helping China's largest cotton producer to spread the wealth.
Demand for cotton quilts ushering peak season as temperatures see a sudden drop in many parts of China. In Changji, one of Xinjiang's major cotton producing regions, a textile manufacturer who prefers not to be named has reaped an early surge in sales of their cotton beddings thanks to live streaming. Zhou Wenjing, one of the company's hired live streamers, says the account she uses now has gained more than 10,000 followers in just a few months.
The number of orders placed on all our live stream platforms is about 500 to 700 per day. Customers all over the country have come to buy our quilts after sanctions were imposed on Xinjiang cotton in April. Their support for Xinjiang cotton is mainly patriotic. Some say they don't need a quilt, but still buy one to support us.
The company's professional live streamer team work in almost every part of the factory. So the whole process of quilt making is in plain sight for the consumers to see.
Many people may worry the cotton used is not of good quality and will take them to see all the raw materials. Customers will feel it worthwhile buying an authentic Xinjiang cotton quilt. And as they place an order, we also have a great sense of achievement to support my income and sell Xinjiang cotton all over the country.
Through live streams, a wide audience can also learn about the lives of ethnic minority workers in Xinjiang's textile factories, which are often accused of benefiting from products made with forced labor. Live streamers say facts speak louder than words.
I've gone from being a junior employee to a team leader. Now my monthly salary can reach over 7,000 yuan. I'm quite satisfied with that. I feel working at a textile factory is not bad, whether it's the working environment, living conditions, or this position, which I'm capable for.
A manager of the company says both sales volume and production volume have continued to double annually since 2018. Their sales volume hit an all-time high of 27 million yuan, about $4 million, with live stream sales accounting for 20% of the total.
None of us expected our sales in April would be 3 times higher than that of the same month in previous years. Products made of Xinjiang cotton are far from enough for the Chinese domestic market. By the end of this August, our sales volume had already surpassed all of last year.
Along with the growing sales, the manager says the amount of salary and welfare benefits are also increasing. And it's getting even easier to expand the market as live streaming brings in new clients and keeps loyal customers coming back. Feng Yilei, CGTN, Changji, Xinjiang.
And that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but still to come on Global Business Africa, we'll be taking a closer look at how the ongoing Sudan takeover will impact the country's economic sector. Of course, all that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to you.
Thank you, Uche. You're watching Africa Live. Coming up in sports news. South Africa's Peninah Club aiming to help budding athletes.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Some sports now. Nestled below the prestigious